This is part 2 on how to build a high-performing SDR team with Chris Ritson. This is the SDR Game podcast, the podcast created to accelerate your sales career and build more pipeline. In today's episode, part 2, we will cover hiring based on the first conversation we had with Ritson. So let's dive in. I'm going to start with a quick recap for everyone listening. So obviously you can listen to the first episode, but here are the main takeaways from episode number 1. We talked with Chris about hiring the right people is crucial for building a high-performing SDR team. But before hiring, there is a foundation you need to build to find the right people, the behavior you want on your team, the culture, the playbook you want to have to build this team. We talk about creating a team culture and playbook aligned with the behaviors you want to drive high performance, understanding individual goals and tying them to sales performance to increase the motivation of your team and commitment, and the obsession with learning and continuous improvement to have a long-term success. So Chris, excited to have you back on the show.
Yeah, delighted to be back, Ulrich. I really enjoyed the first part, and I feel like we've got a lot to talk about in this episode as well.
Let's focus on hiring. So we talked about the foundation last time. Today we'll have to focus around the hiring process. How do you assess, for example, the behavior you need on your team? And what do you think helps your process to find the right people?
I've always been really relentless with using pretty much the same process. The reason why is because once you've identified the behaviors that you want on the team, the job is to then go and extract those behaviors from a group of people that you have never met before. Right? You have no idea who they really are. So you've got to create a system and a process that I think fairly, because they're all going to be different individuals, right? That fairly, allows them to exhibit, whether they do or do not have the behaviors that you want to see, right? First things first, I think is you want to be thinking about as a hiring manager. You want to be thinking about taking full ownership over that hiring process. And now I see this happen all the time where, okay, we hire maybe an internal talent team, and then the talent team starts taking the sourcing and the CV reviews and the first interviews. And that's kind of, that's great and all in terms of, sieving potential bad fits out. But also, I think with regards to that, I see a lot of a lack of communication between hiring managers and talent teams. So if you do have a talent team, make sure you're on the same page with exactly the behaviors that you're looking for and exactly how those behaviors are going to be brought out, right? And what's the talent team doing that's repeatable? And you should be in charge of dictating what that looks like, even though they are the talent experts. You're the person that is in the most know or the most knowledgeable about who specifically you want on your team and who's going to be successful. So don't delegate that. Don't let that, don't feel like it's a bad thing not to be super anal about that, right? I think having control over that's going to be really, really important if that is the case. I think the other thing is, no matter what, I always, even for myself, if I was hiring, whatever roles I was hiring for, whatever managers I was managing were hiring for, it was so important that they got involved in the outreach process as well, and were doing their own outbound, and they were searching for the right people and bringing people into the funnel, because that was one of the hardest things, right? One of the hardest things is getting a candidate pool that is big enough for you to be able to pick who you want, right? Everyone always says in sales, okay, how amazing would it be if we had so much pipeline, we can just choose which deals we work on. Well, it's exactly the same philosophy from a talent pipeline perspective, right? It's you absolutely work with a talent team and agencies or whatever on, and we'll get to agencies in a second, but on getting the inbound leads coming in, aka your inbound candidates coming in. But bear in mind that a lot of inbound isn't that higher quality. So you're going to you also should be looking at combining that with your own outbound efforts, right? Of, okay, who are our competitors? Which people at those competitors are doing really well? How do I know that? Oh, because I've been to networking events or whatever, and I've met them. I've seen them on stands, events, and spoken to them, and I love them. Right. Okay. I'm going to build relationships with them. And when they are looking, okay, they know that I'm there and want to hire them. Right. So I used to do a lot of that work. And it goes back to the first episode, right, where I said, like, if you hire the right people in the first place, it's solves 99% of your future problems. But part of that hiring is making sure you have a candidate pool that's big enough and good enough for you to be able to cherry pick them, and outbounding people, building relationships with people who you really want to hire at some point. Might not be able to hire them right now, but nurturing those relationships over a long period of time was something that we used to relentlessly do at the organizations we worked at, so that when people were looking, or something happened, or they got laid off, or whatever happened that was that business that made them leave, the first people they were thinking about was, okay, I'm going to give Chris a call and see if there's any jobs going at his business, right? Because I'd already told them, if you ever are looking, I'll always be open to a conversation with you. Just make sure that you give me a call. Here's the reasons why I'd love to work with someone like you and have you on the team. And that would be something that we would do a lot. And one thing that we had was we had, like, the SDRs and AEs, they have like a hot list of accounts that are like their primary targets. We used to have a hot list of candidates that were like primary targets for people that we knew were high performers, were at competitors, and therefore they knew the industry landscape. And we weren't saying, come and join our company. We were saying, hey, when and if you are ever looking, I'd love to have the conversation with you for these reasons. And balls in your court. And that's where we ended up getting a lot of people who were open to those conversations because they didn't have a manager that they loved, or the commission plan had been changed, or whatever, people leave for these days. So that was like the start point for our hiring piece, was creating a candidate pool from inbound and outbound efforts. The other thing that was like a golden rule for me was we treat recruitment agencies, with respect. Because I used to work at a company that they used to treat the recruitment agencies like rubbish, like they were like second-rate humans almost. And I was always like, and I saw this behavior in multiple different scenarios where they're like, oh, the agency's rubbish. They're sending me rubbish candidates and all this stuff. And one of the behaviors that I look for in my candidates is extreme ownership. And I have extreme ownership as part of the way that I like to operate. And I'm like, I was always like, I'm the one that hired the agency. I'm the one that enabled the agency by telling them what I was looking for and what I wasn't. I'm the one that told them the process. I'm the one that hasn't bothered turning up to their meetings or calls. So no wonder the results are rubbish, right? And my golden rule was like, okay, like, treat their agencies with respect and absolutely partner with them. And when it goes wrong, it's on you as to why it's gone wrong with them, not on them. Think about what you can do differently. So the reason why I used to do that was because one reason only, because it made the candidate pool better, right? If it made that better, the chances of me finding the right people for this organization, this team, were going to be considerably higher. And they were the bets that I wanted to take. They were the things that I was optimizing for with these things. So I would have, before things have even kicked off with an interview and me looking at CVs, it's all about like, can I get enough people on the table that, and the people who are putting those people on the table have a really clear understanding of exactly what I'm looking for and why. And are they able to sell that to them so that when they are on the table and they do or across from me, they're walking into this meeting thinking, okay, this is my number one opportunity to win. Because we've all interviewed before at places, right? And before we go in, we've all got like a preconceived idea. we were like, yeah, this is my number one. I wanted to be the number one that everyone wanted to work with, not just me, but the business, right? And that came down to enabling our talent team to sell this opportunity better than any other talent team could sell it. It was enabling the recruitment agency to sell it. It was enabling my managers to do outreach that got people interested and build relationships with them. So that was a really, really important part initially that got the right people in front of us and got the right people excited before we'd even started having a conversation and figuring out whether they were right or not. And then once we'd done that, the people, you know, we'd look at people's CVs, right? I didn't really take the CV that seriously because some people are good at writing, some people are less good at writing, and I didn't have any like prerequisites really for CVs. I'd have a little scan over them just to get maybe a bit of information that I could, you know, ask them some questions around or whatever. But what I really cared about once we identified these people was getting them into an interview process as quickly as possible, because speed, we optimized for speed. And that process was the same process for everyone, every single time, no matter what. It had to be the same process, and it was the same environment. And I was actually on a call with the guy called David Bentham, runs an SDR team recently. We ended up speaking for about an hour about how like anal we both were about hiring and how deliberate we were. And for me, my process was a 3-step process for SDR hiring specifically. But the first one, or the first interview, was just a pure behaviors interview. And I always led with the behaviors interview, because it didn't matter to me how good your hard skills were. If you weren't hitting the behaviors, you weren't going any further in the process and wasting everyone's time. And sometimes it was tempting, right? Where you were like, oh, this person's actually awesome. But then you're like, but they're just a dick, right? Or they're not fitting these behaviors. So yeah, like we was just a behavioral interview, right? Where, you know, in terms of the nuts and bolts of that, it would probably be somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes. And, you know, depending on how long their answers were. And I would ask them questions around the 7 core behaviors.
You were talking about agencies, working with your talent team and doing outbound. For outbound specifically, also, I know it's something we should do as hiring managers, but also I know from the candidate experience, receiving a message from you, for example, it's not the same as receiving a message from the recruiter or the talent team. Because if you see the director of sales development reaching out to you personally, you know that this person is like just a recruitment team that's going to contact maybe 200 candidates. You are part of 10 candidates maybe. So because I know that you don't have a lot of time to do outbound for candidates, but it means that you are really picky about who you are contacting. So I think from the candidate experience, that's really good.
It was pretty simple. If we had an open role, then, you know, that was our number one priority. Really was making sure that we hired or brought in the right people outside of coaching, right? That the number one priority was making sure that we hired the right people. So that meant that whoever the hiring manager was for that role, like they would be dedicating like an hour or so a day of their time to outbound, or X amount of meetings to enable the recruitment agency or enable the talent team, or etc. And we used to do a couple of things. There's a couple of things. So like from as I was speaking about, like there's the inbound motion, right, and making the inbound motion as good as possible, and then there's the outbound motion. And the inbound bit was just about enabling folks. The outbound bit was this like one-to-one messaging of people. And simply put, like the way that we focused it was we'd have a job description or an idea of the sort of, you know, the perfect candidate that we wanted, right? And we actually used to call the perfect candidate a name. We used to ask this question at the end of interviews and things like that. We would be like, how close is John to our perfect candidate? It's called Susie. but how close is John to Susie, right? And we'll be like, oh, John's pretty different here. Okay, well, John's not probably the right person then because of those reasons. And it became really, it was like, what that allowed us to do was it allowed us to identify candidates in like a non-biased way, rather than like me being like, oh, I like them because, you know, it just feels good. It was like, tell me how similar they are to this, like, and Susie was not a real person, right? It was just like an avatar, but it was like, is this person like Susie? And if not, then we wouldn't hire. But the point being was like, we'd also reach out to people first and foremost, like similar industry as us. So they had like some sort of like understanding. It was difficult to find, to obviously find like people who were just like, you know, not just graduates, but graduates, no sales experience, people straight out of school, etc. People from apprenticeships, because they weren't really on LinkedIn. So our outbound efforts were very specifically on people with a little bit of sales experience, our competitors who we knew were good. The inbound efforts were very, very focused on graduates, no sales experience, etc. So that's where we were advertising to, you know, graduate recruitment pools and communities and things like that. So that's where we got this blend of, and because I wanted a team that was a hybrid. It wasn't all no experience and it wasn't all lots of experience. It was a blend, so we could learn from each other. And the inbound motion just allowed us to drive towards to pick up the best, you know, people who hadn't had any experience in sales and didn't know what an amazing sales career could offer, and these other people who were good, but they maybe hadn't been treated in the right way.
And to go back on what you were saying about working with the talent team also earlier, because sometimes as hiring manager, I think when I started, I was relying too much on them without giving expectation. And when you were talking about extreme ownership on what are you looking for, what type of soft skills do you want, or behaviors do you want? So recently found my previous role, generally it's we have like a call with the talent acquisition person, and I talk with them, and together we build like the ideal profile of a candidate. What are we looking for on the profile? Same on the first interview. So, but for agencies, I have questions, because when did you hire an agency or start working with agencies? Is it because you have like a situation where you need to hire 5 people and don't have enough candidates in your pool, or what was the reason?
The reason was always to find the best people that we possibly could.
Okay.
So it's as simple as that, right? And I always,
that's a good reason.
Yeah, it was as simple as that. It was there's not a complex answer for it. It was, okay, the questions that I would be saying is the hiring agency going to help us increase the pool of potential talent that we can choose from? Probably yes. Do we have to pay for that? No, at that stage. Okay, so that's a benefit. The second part is, all right, what if if that pool includes people that the hiring agency have put in front of us that are better than everyone else? Well, yeah, that's a great thing, right? Because they have now found someone that's better than who we found. Should we pay for that? Absolutely, right? Like, and that's how I kind of, I always looked at it. Was I always have this thing in my head that my mum always used to say this to me, and we could never really afford to do it. Was if you buy something cheap, you pay twice. And we always used to buy stuff cheap because we couldn't afford it growing up, right? So we'd always pay twice or 3 times. Like at school, we always used to have, my dad used to drop me off at school, and we always used to have the worst car, right? They used to be super rusty and like made a noise and all that sort of stuff. So I used to ask my dad to like, you drop me off like 100 meters before school because this is too embarrassing. But we couldn't afford to buy a car that was like, more than £500. So like every 6 months, my dad was like buying a new car because that one had broken down. But the lesson from that was, 1, don't worry about what people think about your car. But two, the lesson was like, the job here is to, if we find someone amazing, then okay, I'm okay with paying for that, taking that out of my budget, because if they stay with me and this business for 4, 5, 6 years, I'm going to save so much money in finding an AE in the future, or, spending so much time in one-to-ones trying to ramp someone that takes me 6 months to ramp. This person's going to take me 3. And that's what I'm thinking about. And I think there's 2 ways into being successful as building a team. One of them is, you do all the hard work yourself, and you should definitely do some of that bit. The second bit is buying it. Right, that's kind of the cheat code. That's why people raise money. But we shouldn't be scared of buying important things like talent, and top talent, and secrets, right, that they know that other people don't know, and how to do things that only they can do in a certain way, and stuff like that. So I'm always prepared to pay. If there's anything I'm prepared to pay a premium for, it's the best people. And if an agency can put that in front of me, I'm like, that's a no-brainer.
Having the way of thinking about this is you're investing, obviously your time but money. And unfortunately, on time, you don't have you can't find all the candidates yourself. So,
and sometimes you find an amazing candidate, right? And sometimes the agency does, and sometimes the talent team do. And this is the thing: is I always just say, look, folks, between the 3 of us, the management team here, the agency and the talent, we're going to find, the job here is to find the absolute best person. I don't care where it comes from, but this is my role and I'm taking the lead on it. And this is how we need to work together on that. Whereas I think a lot of hiring managers make the mistake of, cool, I've got 3 open roles. I'll just employ an agency and then it's outsourced and jobs are good and I don't need to do any work for that. Your job is the project manager and the executor of part of that project, I think. And it's almost like what a lot of AE and SDR leaders do, right? Where they've got a target to hit and a goal to hit, and they're happy to just sit back and watch everyone else do it and not get involved. But then they complain when they're not hit the target, right? So it's the same with hiring for me. It's we can blame the person being a bad hire, but you were the one that made him.
Is that what did you miss during the hiring process?
Yeah. Was it a bad hire, or did I? Was the onboarding process so complicated that no one could understand what we do?
Last question on sourcing specifically. Did you have a referral program also on top in your inbound funnel?
We did have a referral program. It's my belief that good people know good people. What we didn't want was people to just hire their friends. Because what we didn't want was just cliques and these very small groups of people. But if someone if someone was recommended, then we would always take that very seriously. But they would go through the exact same process, and the person who referred knew that, right? We would say they will go through a rigorous process. There's not going to be any freebies here, because you look silly for recommending, I look silly for hiring, and this person here who ends up getting let go or whatever, that's not good for them. So let's not make that, or let that happen before it happens.
I remember when I was at Chili Pepper, I think I don't remember if it was the case with the ATS we were using. We were trying to hide if it was a referral, actually. So actually, as a hiring manager, you don't know if it's a referral or not. So at least you are not biased on the way you're assessing the person.
Yeah, nice.
Now you find the right candidate, inbound, outbound, or an agency. How do you make your position the number one for your candidate?
So one thing that is incredibly underrated by everyone is the job description. Job description is just a bit of copy, right? The words that you write on there have the ability to sell that person on whether the role is something that they should or shouldn't be excited by the time they've read to the end of the copy. Most hiring managers, it's just a copy and paste, right? We've all done it before. Copy and paste, cool, here's the one from 3 years ago, just stick that in. The way that we used to do it was we did it differently. You had one page max with your job description. Within that, it would be, you would say basically like what's the role? All right. When do you have to have applied by? So we would always put a bit of urgency in there, just that applications close here. Always worked, right? Rather than just, this is a job ad that is going to be live forever. And then we would say, this job ad is for someone like this. It is not for people like this. All right. So what we wanted to create there was for people to be able to opt themselves in or out.
It was based on the behavior you're looking for?
Yeah. We're very deliberate about like, here's what the sort of behaviors that we're looking for. And then we would also include some social proof. So I've never ever seen, outside of the job descriptions we used to produce, anyone putting any social proof in their job descriptions. And what we used to put the social proof we used to use was internal reviews of how much they loved, people in the role at the moment love their manager, right? And then the final bits were, here's what we will give to you if you join our organization. And those things were, it wasn't, here's your role and responsibilities. It was, here's what we're going to give you. We'll give you a coaching plan. We'll give you these skills. We'll care about your development through these actions, right? You know, we weren't bothered about, put on unlimited annual leave or things like that. They were like, these very small things that we could get to the details of them later when we discussed the contract. If we were going to offer those people, what we wanted were people who cared about their development enough, right, to want to apply to this opportunity, because we wanted hungry people who wanted to get better and wanted to win, right? But win within the realms of being a good human being as well.
Yeah.
But we also wanted to use that one page to sell, right? And I don't see those job descriptions don't sell anything. Like, they just say a few roles and responsibilities. It's super boring. It's the same thing. But honestly, we used to get so many good. We used to ask people like, okay, why did you apply to the job and all those sort of things, and they'd be like, well, yeah, I've never seen anyone put like a review of what the SDR team are currently saying about the existing manager and how much they love them. And then they came into the interview from that being like, I want to work for this guy, right? So like, one of our managers was a guy called Lawrence, and he used to have a lot of really great reviews. We put a couple into the job ads. They'd come in and be like, that's Lawrence. Like, yeah, I want to work for that guy. Before they'd even come into the interviews, right? Because they knew that other people were saying, he's special, he's great, he cares about me, he loves me. So the feeling and the emotion is, wow, like I want this person because they're going to look after me. They're going to care about me. And in turn, they're not just going to care about me. They're going to give me all these like skills, right? And I'm either this person or I'm not. And yes, of course, like it's a job ad, so you're looking to get quantity there of signups. But the interesting thing was like the kind of opt-in piece. Like, it filtered out a lot of people that were not up for it, because we made it, tough. Like, okay, sounds all like gonna have to work a bit here, right? But in turn, I get this amazing manager and this development opportunity. That sounds exciting. I'm up, like that's something I'm up for, and that's a mutual value relationship that I'm keen to create with this business. That's what we were looking for. So we did something different with job ads.
It made me think, when my first job, actually, I was not in sales, but I was always hearing from the owner of the company say, how Gen Z and millennials, they don't want to work for companies forever. I think with this type of job description, it gives you, you want to work for this company for years, not just like 6 months. Because here what you are just showing is, hey, yes, it's a tough job, but also here what we are going to give you, and we are going to enable you. Because we know that when you join a company, also it's to help with your career, and here you are showing it in the job description.
Yeah, it was honestly like, that was the objective, right? Our objective was not to find SDRs. Right? Well,
Yeah,
it was.
it's a talent for the go-to-market
Yeah,
team. It's the SDR. It's the first step.
yeah. Our objective was, okay, like, can we find people that are going to be of value to the business for a long period of time? That, yeah, are slight rough diamonds, but the diamond is still there. It's our job to work with them over a period of time to get them to where they want to be. And we used to see, all of our managers at one point were all internal promotions. Over 75% of our AE team came from the SDR team, right, including mid-market and enterprise. And yes, 5-6 years for that business, for that to be built, or that, people to go through those levels. But a lot of those people are still enterprise AEs now, at the same business. And you don't hear it very often. You're always like, wow, you've been in the business for 6 years. Like, are you weird? It's like, no, it's just, I didn't want to leave because I've got such a good thing going on. And it's completely okay and fine to create it. And I always rejected this notion. Someone told me this once, the CEO, I won't say who it was, but it was the CEO told me, it's like, you need to just plan for people to be in the seat for about 18 months and just plan for that. And I was like, are we not setting ourselves up for failure if we're not prepared to try and build a system that allows us to prepare for people that are, or build a career path here that people can stay here for 4 or 5 years? And they're like, well, yeah, people will just do that. They're flaky. And I'm like, well, they won't be flaky if you create an environment where they feel the love and they feel like you deeply care about them and where they're going on this journey. If they are able to exhibit, consistent behaviors in these areas, and that's the give and the take, right? But most businesses just take it. We're setting systems up to take, and that's when it breaks people and salespeople, and they're just like, I'm done, so I'm going to leave.
And that's what you see on the job description, actually, because most of the job description is what the candidate can do for the company and not what the company will do for you.
100%. And it's like, you mentioned the Gen Z and the millennial piece, right? Where that people talk about a lot. And my parents talk about this a lot. And they're just like, oh, well, like Gen Zs and millennials, they're not very resilient. And my response to that is, what's the evidence that they're not very resilient? Like, well, they're moving jobs, they're not sticking it out. And I'm like,
yeah, but what did you do
more of an intelligent? I like speak to my parents. I'm like, well, you guys have done the same job for 40 years and you hated it, right? So like these millennials and Gen Zs are leaving jobs after 2 years that they hate because they want to go and find something that they love. Who's had the wool pulled over their eyes? It's actually probably you, to my mum and dad, right? And it's totally okay because it's unconditional love. But the point being with them, I'm like, well, you've done that for 40 years in the name of resilience, but you've been really unhappy, right? Like, surely the objective with a profession and a career, or your 20s, right? That was how I used to think about it, was when I was in my 20s, was my job in my 20s is to work out what I enjoy and then go and do more of that stuff. Right? So I walked out and I loved leading SDR teams. Everyone was like, why are you not leading the AE teams? Like, I just love this. So I'm going to just do more of this because I'm getting my kicks here. And that's where I think that's the power of millennials and Gen Zs, is they're prepared to actually fight for that and stand up for that. Gen Z's even more so than millennials, right? At least just baby boomers and different generations say, they've got no resilience and stuff like that. I think it takes a lot more to stand up to your boss and say, hey, I'm going to leave because I'm unhappy, than I'm just going to stick it out for 40 years because and I hate what I'm doing. So yeah, that's my take on it.
I think the only company I've seen doing this, I think, it's Snowflake, in terms of selling. If you join Snowflake, you join a company for 4 years, because they have I think they call it the sales development school, or I don't remember the program they have. And they have a website for this. You have videos, and it's for when I'm thinking about hiring. I think obviously if you have a team of 200 SDRs plus SDR, you have resources. But the way I'm thinking about, if I want to exactly do what you are saying, that's the vision for the vision. I was using Snowflake as an example to how can I build this here. Obviously, with a team of 10, it's not, you can't do exactly the same. But I think having this as an example that helped me to think about how we can sell that to candidates. How can we be like you said, the number one opportunity for them?
Yeah, and Snowflake got a very, very interesting hiring playbook as well, right? Where similar concept to how I get a similar way to how I think about it, I think is I just repeat the same process. And I guess that kind of leads us to the next part here. This is like the actual hiring like process and the interviews and stuff like that. But yeah, so repeat that process to create a fair environment for the people in front of you to either show you they've got what it takes or not. And then you make a really clear decision.
Now we can talk about the hiring process specifically, but step number one, it's interview to assess behaviors. Do you do it, or do you have like a step with a recruiter or talent person on your team?
I do it. It's designed so anyone can do it. I have there's 7 behaviors that we're looking for. There's set questions for each one of those behaviors, one or two questions max. And all of the questions are scenario based. And you have a score, there's a scoring sheet as well. So you score every single answer to every question, and they have to hit a certain score collectively to be able to move through to the next round.
So that's this scorecard specifically is just for the number one interview, right?
That's the number one interview. It's just those 7 behaviors and 1 or 2 questions for each one scored, and they have to have hit a certain total to be able to move through to the next one. If they don't hit the total, yeah, that's a disqualify.
You said scenario-based questions. When you say scenario, is it something from the past, or you give them like a scenario and how they will react in this situation, or what's the type of questions here?
Here's an example. One of the behaviors is extreme ownership. I will ask them to tell me about their day-to-day in their previous role or their previous job. I'm looking for detail, right? Can you own everything about that day? Are you planning it? Are you thinking about how are you thinking about it? Is it all on you, etc.? They're the things that I'm actually looking for. Like they're scenario based. They're very, very open questions. You get all kinds of answers, but I'm looking to tick boxes on like, okay, is the person actually like, are they planning? Are they meticulous? Are they going into detail? Are they taking ownership, or are they blaming something else? All right. And those sort of things is what I'm looking for with that one. Right. And that's like, that's one of them. My other one, right. And I actually wrote my thesis at university on emotional intelligence. I had no idea that it was going to be used so much in sales. I studied psychology and neuroscience at uni, and I'm kind of obsessed with it, but it's, is emotional intelligence, right? So like the question that I used to ask would be like, okay, tell me 3 things you would do differently in this interview. And this is the final question. In this interview, if you got another shot at doing it, right? And all I'm looking for there is like, okay, can they quickly assess what they did wrong, or what they could have done better, so they can be able to improve on it kind of straight away to fill the gaps. Because I think that happens a ton in sales, right? Is you're constantly making mistakes in conversations live. Like, can you come back?
And it's normal. We are not robots, so it's normal to make mistakes.
Yeah, but yeah, 100%. And I'll always keep in all of my things at the end, all the questions. Sorry, at the end, I'll always say, go into detail. And then it's interesting to see, because it's open ended. Like detail will go into detail means something different to everyone, right? What comes out as the behavior is really evident in the answer, because if I say go into detail, somebody will be like, okay, bullet point, and then that's their version of detail. Whereas some people might be like, this because of this, and this is what I did about it, and then this, and they'll go on about it, right? And that's kind of what I'm actually assessing when I'm asking someone to do that. It's not a trick. It's just, can you actually do it? Can you think about it in a way that I want you to think about it, and then produce, that in a verbalized answer to me. So yeah, that's how I used to do the first interview, and we made it very binary. You either got to that number or you didn't get to that number, basically.
I love the extreme ownership, about taking ownership, for example, on problems, what you mentioned earlier, if they are blaming something, because I learned this the hard way in my first role. That was not something important, I would say, at the beginning, because I learned this the right way with a rep on my team, and it was, oh yeah, but it's summer, no one is replying to emails. I was, yeah, but what can you do about that? It's summer. Let's focus on what you can control. We know each summer it's the same, each December it's the same. So let's focus on what we can control. When that's going to happen anyway. So, and that's a behavior of. I've read a book. It was the Sales Leadership Playbook, I think, something like that. I don't remember the author, but they talk about the victim disease. They call it this way in the book, and it was not about extreme ownership, but I think it's really correlated, both of them. It's how can you assess extreme ownership? So, and we use another method where we talk about the experience and we ask questions about the situation, what was challenging at this role, and you can see patterns between experiences. And someone who's going to blame instead of taking ownership is going to say, "Oh yeah, but my manager didn't do this." And experience number one, okay, that's something I want to see on experience two. Experience two again, and then you can, here I was not assessing extreme ownership, but I think it's really correlated to extreme ownership.
I mean, I'm biased, but I agree. I think it just comes down to the best people are able to make unconscious good decisions. Those decisions are things like, okay, will I make one more dial, right, or will I give up because no one's picked up, or will I put all of my effort into this one task to make it really good for this 35th personalized email of the morning and no one's responded to me yet, right? And they're that's the difference between someone actually winning and losing a lot of the time in whatever profession, whether it's, sales or professional sport or whatever. It's can you just keep going at something to a really high level for longer than other people? And if you can, you probably will be successful. That might not be immediate, but you probably will be successful in the long term.
Chris, I know we're on time, so we're just talking about the hiring process, so we'll need a part 3 to talk about the rest of the process. But again, I think we went really deep on the topic. I'm sure it's going to be helpful for the listeners on hiring. So thanks again.
Yeah, we can go into part 3. That's all good, man. That's all good. Cool. It's been a pleasure. This has gone ridiculously fast. Again. Yeah, that's a good thing because it just reminds me of how much I love chatting about these things, right?
Which is good. So for everyone listening, thanks again for listening to the episode. I see you on the next one.
Bye for now, folks.
If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So for Spotify, to leave a review, what you can do is you can use your phone, then go on the Spotify app, then you go to the SDR game page, and then at the top of the page, you can leave a review. It's a 5-star review if you enjoyed the episode, obviously. And then if you are listening to this episode on Apple Podcasts, feel free also to leave a review on your app. Thanks for listening, and I see you on the next episode.